Okay, remember that they're changing my voice. So here is another video that came up in my feed, and it's very significant. A St. Gabriel police officer was stabbed to death. Now keep in mind there was a knife by where I usually park. I thought it was significant. I uploaded that video to connect it to the Marissa DiNapoli murder. And recently her ex-boyfriend got arrested. If I read it correctly, he got arrested coming back from Mexico to America. Like, that doesn't make sense. Why didn't they get him on the way there, right? Okay. But for whatever reason, people managed to make it there. Maybe I read that wrong. But what I didn't read wrong for sure is it was a St. Gabriel police officer who was stabbed to death. And the chief in that case, his name is Chief Embo. You have the M for the magic, and I was talking about that, and the word Ebo. Ebo is also spelled with an E. It's spelled three major ways. One, IBO, two, EBO, and three, IGBO, where the G is silent. And Freemasonry has a lot to do with Ebos. Ebos are like the tribe that civilized the world in a nutshell, right? It was martial arts that civilized the world. It was Ebo martial arts, okay, specifically that civilized the world in their ancient form. Perhaps, I mean, certainly it starts before the Ebo tribe was even a tribe. The Ebo tribe is like a nation of different tribes. In a sense, it's like Egypt away from Egypt, where a bunch of different African groups came together and formed an Ebo tribe that is a huge tribe. There's lots of Ebos all over the world. It's one of the biggest tribes in the entire world. I used to describe it as the biggest Christian tribe, specifically tribe of any race in the world. Nigeria is the most populated country in Africa. It's in the heart of Africa. And they're the main people who came to the transatlantic slave trade, right? It was Yorubas, it was Ebos. That's where this voodoo stuff comes from, Santeria. It comes from West African witchcraft. Doesn't come from East Africa or North Africa or South Africa. It comes from West Africa. Now, I know they're trying to make it so I sound corny or something, trying to make it so I sound arrogant. Bear with me. Read the annotations if you have to. Double check with the audio as needed. And since it's easy for me to talk this way, has something to do with the brain hacking, I'm just going to continue to say it this way. So bear with me. So these corny people who try to make it so I seem corny, right? These Shallow Hal, Corny Collins, okay, Vince McMahon types, their crests and their social clubs and their fraternities, then the military, the police, okay, because you have to call them out everywhere they are. And the main place they are where people try to seem more professional than other people, nice restaurants, nice estates, dinner parties, okay, churches, when they try to look better than other churches, some Catholic church groups, what have you. So this person was stabbed to death, and his name was Officer Booty, which goes back to Marissa. If you notice, the word Marissa is Maria's scrambled with two S's. So therefore you have the word ass when you scramble it, thus Officer Booty, thus connecting it to Marissa and Maria. Now, if you look at this thing, you know that white people like to play games like bingo and crossword puzzles and charades. It's right up their alleyway for them to do this. Now, think about a bunch of corny old CIA people and their allies playing bingo, playing charades, and they decide to make it more interesting by including bloodshed and persecuting the righteous and going after those young chicks, right? Why are chicks so stupid that they often, whore themselves to some rich old guy? Be it at work, be it, they meet them at the lounge, what have you. Why is that? Because people get in their heads, right? It's part of psychological operation. In fact, the word psychological comes from the word psyche. I think I brought this up earlier on in this playlist, right? Where psyche, this is a huge part worth repeating. Psyche is a deity, a Greek deity, whose name means mind or soul. That stupid bird. There's a lot of birds that, they got fumes super tough and they make a lot of noise in the background here. I'm going to make this in a clip. It means mind and soul. And then Ops is another name for Rhea. Mars raped Rhea Sylvia. And Rhea's name scrambled is Hera. Okay, so Psyche and Ops. Psych ops, psychological operations. And even to this day, the gang members are starting to call, or they've been calling their enemies ops. And it subtly alludes to psychological operations. If you look at the Vice Lords, for example, they wear these dark black glasses, the same thing the Crips and Bloods wear. Why is that? I'm sure, Serenos wear them, Norteños, because it goes back to darkness and evil, the dark side. It goes back to black ops. Why do they have this satanic theme for their gangs in Chicago? because they're killing people with an emphasis on people that the governing class wants them to kill. They're like bounty hunters. There's even a gang called the Bounty Hunters with strong ties to the Peace Stones, which goes back to Chicago, right? They found their way to LA as well. Okay. So it's pretty straightforward. And of course you get the 6-point star of the gangster disciples, the 5-point star of the people's nations, connecting it to politics and to Zionism, political Zionism, Judaism, what have you. Right, the hex, the hexagram, whatever it's called, the hex star, whatever. That's been a while. And this is 6 points, 6 sides, and 6 triangles, if I'm not mistaken here. The Star of David, right? But whose star? Where is that star in the Bible? That's the star of those who superimpose things on the idea of the root and offspring of David, like their false image of Christ. And all this stuff is very relevant. For those of you who think, what does this have to do with this? The guy was stabbed to death in Saint Gabriel. Gabriel is an angel's name in popular culture. And starts with gay for a reason, because they're LGBT. The church historically was LGBT behind the scenes. That's why so many kids were raped in church. It's always been that way as far as anyone can tell. Okay? Because the Western church is not a valid organization, not a valid spiritual idea. Right? It is a pagan idea. It's a Roman institution, a neo-Roman institution of social control. So, yeah. And again, the guy's name was Chief Embo. And it goes chief, right? Chief, like a king. And the person, it was the shooting in Philadelphia, where the person was killed, or the people were shot to death and other people were wounded, on the 1500 block of King Street. So Chief Embo, Chief Ebo, 1500 block of King Street. You see how it all comes together there. And they try to change it up, try to make it so I sound hood at times. They try to make it so I sound gay, manic, weird. They're on some weirdo stuff. They're on some weirdo dissociative personality disorder. If you think about a lot of Jews, they have autism. A lot of English. It's like, when you see these guys looking like they have a cold or something and they're acting weird, that's mental illness. It's developmental disorders, right? They have, cerebral palsy, they have autism, they have various developmental disorders. That's why it's called autism spectrum disorder. Spectrum, because there's a spectrum of that weird behavior. What you know is white is really like homosexuality and autism on a spectrum. And of course, they also have on a spectrum Down syndrome, choosing down. Now, it's not that everyone who has Down syndrome is evil or something, but these people are more inclined, is one way to put it, to go into the occult. So they disassociate. Instead of competing, instead of striving with the challenges that God put before them, they throw in the towel like some kind of punk.